Welcome to Greenlit, the Buffalo 8 podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Halderman, and each week we're going to dive into a different piece of content, film and television, and we're going to talk with some of the biggest names in front of and behind the camera as we dive deep into how they were financed, produced, developed, marketed, and the crazy stories behind how many of them got made. Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm chatting with Barry Alexander Brown. Barry is a longtime collaborator and the editing partner for Spike Lee. Starting all the way back with Spike's early films, She's Gotta Have It, back when they were in their early 20s in New York, all the way through being nominated for an Academy Award for BlaKKKlansman in the last couple of years, but also on really legendary films like Do the Right Thing and Inside Man. Barry is a phenomenally fascinating guy, really curious. He's actually joining us for this podcast from a house out in France, where he's currently working on a project. Again, really, really intelligent, well-spoken, and unique background, especially partnering with one of the most well-known filmmakers of all time early on in their career. Barry, like a lot of people on this podcast, is a colleague and a friend. Barry is working with Buffalo 8 on a project called Son of the South, which is Barry's directorial sort of return in many ways to narrative filmmaking. That film is currently in post-production at Buffalo 8, and so we had talked about joining up to walk through his past with Spike, but also to talk through the upcoming film Son of the South. Without further ado, enjoy this podcast with Barry Alexander Brown. Welcome back, everybody. This morning I have Barry Alexander Brown, esteemed editor and director, and we're coming off of a project we've worked on together called Son of the South, which Barry directed. So first off, Barry, thanks for joining us and appreciate you carving out the time.
My pleasure.
And I know you're currently, it looks like, in a very beautiful place, I believe over in France.
Very beautiful. Yeah, I'm in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. It's in Provence, just a little south of Avignon. So yeah, it's gorgeous.
Well, today, again, we're going to talk about Son of the South. And so without further ado, how was Son of the South greenlit, Barry?
Well, Son of the South took a long, long time to get made. I wrote the original screenplay about 10 years ago. And it was having a hard time getting made. A lot of people like the screenplay. But finally nobody would come forward to put up the money. About 2 years ago, two producers came on, Colin Bates and Stan Erdrich, along with two of the more original producers, E. Pomerantz and Bill Black. And with Colin and Stan, they were able to go out there, especially Stan, in the state of Alabama, and begin to raise money. I'm from Montgomery, Alabama, where the film took place and where we shot. And Stan is from Birmingham. And Stan went and really just began to beat the bushes there. I don't think I ever imagined that it was going to be money from Alabama that was going to be the original money, the initial money coming in to get this movie made.
Sure.
And yet people in Alabama, they responded to it. They just really responded to it. It's a film about a guy from Alabama, a guy named Bob Zellner, who was born into a Klan family. In 1961, he was graduating from college in Montgomery. And a lot of things happened in Montgomery at that moment in time. I mean, 5 years before that was the bus boycott, the very famous bus boycott in Montgomery. And things that were happening, such as the Freedom Riders coming to Montgomery and being beaten, began to pull Bob into the civil rights movement. And it was a whole summer of him coming up against things and seeing things. And every time he came to one of these crossroads or one of these events, he had to ask himself, well, what person am I? Where do I stand on all this? And Rosa Parks had said to him personally, she said, something really bad is going to happen right in front of you someday. And you're going to have to decide which side you're on. Because not choosing is a choice. Mm-hmm. And nobody gets to stand on the sideline. And I mean, in 1961, she was already a living legend. So it's hard to hear a living legend tell that to you. And you just walk away and say, well, whatever. And that wasn't Bob. And so people from Alabama were looking at this project and reading the script and talking to Stan and myself, both from Alabama. And they liked that this was a story about somebody from Alabama. It took place in Alabama. We were going to shoot in Alabama. And at first, I got a lot of questions about, well, you're just going to make Alabama look bad. And I said, I got to tell you the truth. The villains in this story are from the Deep South. Many of them from Alabama. But many of the heroes in this story are from Alabama. There was Bob, who was from Southern Alabama, like East Bruton and Daphne. There was Rosa Parks. There was Reverend Abernathy. There was John Lewis. He's from Troy, Alabama. There was Clifford and Virginia Durr. There were also white Southerners, both from Alabama. And when Rosa Parks was arrested in 1955, it was the Durrs she called to get her out. And all these people are characters in the film. I mean, because they really were characters. They really were there. They really were part of the story for Bob Zellner in the spring and summer of 1961. So, I said, yeah, the villains are from Alabama, but the heroes are from Alabama too. And that was truly the story of the civil rights movement. Is that so many of the activists that were in the movement were Southerners. Obviously, 99.9% of them were African Americans, but there was still a certain amount of white Southerners that showed up. And also, it's a film that's about a guy who's moving from very much a white world because of how segregated the South was, in 1961. And he was moving because he's getting more and more involved in the civil rights movement. He's moving towards a black world. Mm-hmm. And it had a ring of truth to it because I'm from Montgomery. And all those voices are in my head, all those voices, and so people could read the script in Alabama and it felt like Alabama. It felt real. So our first money to really get the film off the ground came out of Stan Erdrich's friends and people he got to know, mainly around Birmingham, some in Montgomery, but people showing up there because people, it's mainly Alabama's thought of as just very conservative, and it obviously is. But there's other voices in Alabama,
right?
And to the extent that Doug Jones is our senator at the moment. He may not get reelected. Jeff Sessions might get elected. I hope not. But he's a hard person to beat in Alabama. But still, it's not. Alabama's not a. I'm from there, and Alabama's not a hopeless cause. Is all I've got to say. Right. And so that's really how the film got off the ground in terms of the initial money, and then after that, then people from other investors from other parts of the country, in California, New York, New Orleans, where Colin Bates is, because that first money is always the hardest money.
Absolutely. No, that's really helpful context. And so now, sort of thinking through the progress or the timeline of how things are coming together. So you've raised that, like you said, that anchor investor is always the hardest money. And I think it's become harder and harder over the years as the film business has evolved.
I've heard that forever. I've heard that forever. Every year is like hard. I mean, I don't think it ever was easy. It's always been hard, you know? Yeah.
Right. And so now you've raised that really difficult piece, and you guys are sort of now moving towards a real production. So
but
now
also
you get
a lot of things were happening. A lot of things were happening for me personally at that moment in time, which was really a great moment because I got nominated for an Oscar for this, for Klansman. That happened in January, and that was, you know, we were already raising money, but you know, that sort of thing is just a godsend in terms of creating an excitement.
Right.
You know?
Right. So maybe rewind the tape then for a moment, Barry, and talk a little bit about the evolution of working with Spike over the years and how that crescendoed sort of very serendipitously with BlaKKKlansman around the time of Son of the South, and what, like you're saying, what that meant for the film. But I think take us back, starting all the way with She's Gotta Have It, and then building that relationship.
Before She's Gotta Have It.
Please.
Spike and I met in Atlanta, summer of '81. I was already living in New York. I had just made my first film called The War at Home, and it had done well. And I went back down south to try and figure out maybe another project to do down there. And I was living in Atlanta that summer, and we met through a mutual friend. I knew somebody went to Morehouse. I could kind of Morehouse with him, and they were working that summer on a cable show with high school students in Atlanta, and so I met Spike, and then back in New York, I'd helped start a film distribution company called First Run Feature. Which was, you know, key in terms of changing the way American independent films at that moment in time were being distributed, because there really wasn't a distributor when we established First Run Features in 1980. And somehow I'd become the president of First Run Features, which is that was not a good idea, but that's the way it was at that moment in time. And we needed somebody to work part-time to clean prints and get prints ready to go back out, because it was, you know, it was before digital. It was 16 millimeter mainly. And man, this is a good job. This is a good job for a film student. And we were right down in Greenwich Village, our office, and NYU's right there. And so I'd met Spike, and I called Spike up and said, "Listen, Spike, you interested in doing this?" And he said, "Yeah." So even Spike will say to people, "Yeah, Barry gave me my first job in the business." And then over the next few years, you know, Spike has always been Spike, you know. Is something sort of conservative in his personality in terms of getting to know him. He's not just open and effusive like that, right? So I'd say over the next few years, we really began to get to know each other and get to like each other and begin to understand that we had very similar ideas about entertainment and very similar ideas of movies. You know, we both liked Broadway musicals. And that was one of the first things that really pulled us together is that kind of mutual love of the musical. And where, like, all the other independent filmmakers I knew at that moment in time in New York, I think they would have looked down their nose at, like, you know, Oklahoma and My Fair Lady and, you know, Singing in the Rain and West Side Story. Maybe not West Side Story, but, you know, but Spike, both of us were like, you know, we to some extent, like entertainment for entertainment.
Right.
You know, that we can appreciate it. That that it not everything has to be based upon, you know, the message. You know,
Right.
It's also how you deliver the message.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you that there wasn't a lot of other independent filmmakers around that felt that way. You know, I mean, for many of the people I knew at that moment, it was much more like, no, the message is important. You know, and you know, I think both Spike and myself, we were like, yeah, but you know, how about entertainment? You know,
Right.
They were like, you know, and so that pulled us together. So when he did She's Gotta Have It, I mean, we were all also, even when he was at NYU, he would ask me to help him out a little bit on whatever, not much. And I was doing like I did a documentary, a short half-hour documentary about Philippe Petit, the great tightrope walker, about the second great walk he did in New York City. And Spike came on and helped me with that a little bit. And so you know, we were there to help each other. And then he said he was going to do this movie, shoot this movie. And he said, you know, listen, I think I was the only person he knew who had done anything but sort of sound work, because I was doing it for myself, right? Setting up the tracks and the like for a mix. And I could do a cue sheet. And so he asked me, you know, would you do the sound editing? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Because Spike was going to edit it, but I didn't consider myself an editor at that moment anyway.
Right.
And so, I mean, it wasn't a thing about, I had to think, well, I don't know, you know, is it worth it? Or, you know, listen, it was he was making a feature film, which was like amazing, you know, and when your friend asks you to show up, you know, on their first feature, you say yes.
Right.
There isn't like, yeah, let me think about it. Let me read the script. Who's in it? No, you show up. You know, that's all there is to it. And
was there any inkling, Barry, that She's Gotta Have It, that first film, was going to be this? I understand it's, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but was there any way to know it was going to be anything?
No, as a matter of fact, you know, we were trying, because I was now involved with him in the post of that film, and we were trying to raise the money to complete it, to finish it. And I think he needed something in cash, because he was going to go. He was getting a great deal from a studio that was going to mix it. And I think it was actually turned out to be the last film that they ever mixed, because they were going out of business.
Got it.
And so they gave him a deal to do it. I mean, basically debt. And we were trying to raise, I don't know, something like $10,000 or $15,000 to finish the movie. And the movie was finished to the point that you could watch it, right? You could watch the film. I mean, it wasn't mixed, you know, but and in those days, you know, it was probably just the dialogue track of the movie that you saw. Maybe there was probably some music where there was only music, like for the dance number,
Sure.
and but you could still see the movie, and nobody was showing up to see this movie, to not to see it, but to fund it. Nobody. They'd watch the film, would do the screenings, they would watch it. And the general thing that people would come back and say is, listen, there's no market out there for this movie. There's no market out there for a black film like this. There's not. That's what people come back and say. They said, you know, Hollywood's not stupid. Hollywood only sees one color, green.
Right.
You think that if there was an audience out there for this movie, that Hollywood wouldn't be making making these movies? They would be. That's what they would come back and say, which was arrogant. Because Spike would say back to them, listen, there is an audience, And I'm sorry, but Hollywood doesn't know, because Hollywood does not know the audience, even though at that moment in time there was an outrageous percentage of African Americans going to the movies. You know, it was something like 25 to 30% of the audience. You know, I mean, it was far beyond the numbers of the population, right? So he knew these things, and he knew well. You know, and he was, and he felt that he and his brothers and sisters were not being represented, and they were waiting for it. You know, and so John Pearson came through and gave $10,000. You know, invested $10,000, which was great, because I know he was trying to raise money and coming up with zero. So finally, he thought, I think he felt bad. I thought, oh, listen, I got to believe in it myself. So Pearson came through, and that was great. You know, I took the film also at that moment to Jim Stark, who was an attorney at that moment, and he later became Jim Jarmusch's producer. You know, on like Stranger Than Paradise, I think, and a few other films. And you know, Jim Stark was interested in movies, but when, you know, with She's Gotta Have It, he said no. He said, no, I'm not going to invest. I don't believe. But when the film came, he said, oh my God, I'm going to print the T-shirt that said, I said no to Spike Lee, and wear it. I don't think he ever did that, but that was a lot of people, you know, who later, you know, when the film came out and took off, I mean, that film took off, and you know, there's a lot of people that said no to Spike, and then came back and said, oh, listen, obviously I'm wrong. I made a huge error. I think we should, you know, I'd like to talk to you about funding your next film. But every person, man, if you didn't show up for Spike in that first movie, forget it.
So walk me through then. So now you go from She's Gotta Have It, and then I know you guys go do School Days and Do the Right Thing. But now, like you've said, you didn't view yourself as an editor, and I know that was probably part of the reason you and Spike worked so well together. Like you said, you shared ideas, you thought about art and history and entertainment so similarly. Did anything change? And if so, what changed between She's Gotta Have It, fast forwarding to Do the Right Thing, where obviously the editing on Do the Right Thing is so legendary, and that film is just so important in sort of the zeitgeist of, I mean, me growing up as being born in the late 80s. That movie is so unbelievably defining of how we would come to see independent film. And every name that you've used and every film that you've referenced in those great days of New York City, really run and gun guerrilla filmmaking, where it was being built. You were one of those pioneers. It felt like you guys went legit with Do the Right Thing, not in the sense of the message, but went legit in the sense that it was a flag in the ground of, here's something that's going to stand the test of time in a way that so much other independent content just never can and never would. Did anything change? Did you start seeing yourself as an editor? Did you and Spike's relationship evolve? Was there a new dynamic at all?
Well, it was evolving all along. I mean, She's Gotta Have It. I went blank there for a moment because I was thinking, I want to say something. I forgot what it was, but on She's Gotta Have It, Spike had a scene that had a problem with. There was a scene that was supposed to all take place in the camera without a cut. And it was Nola and Greer's love scene. You know, the camera looking straight down on this white bed, and these two bodies that are almost silhouettes, right? And he hated the way it came out, you know, as just how it was shot in camera. Although you thought, well, it's going to work this way. And so he said, I don't know what to do. Can you take a shot at this? Right? And so I cut that sequence, And that's the first sequence I cut for Spike. And that was also a sequence that got us into trouble because the film kept getting a X rating, and it was because of that scene. But also that scene, I did something when I cut it just to make Spike laugh, but it has ended up being something we've used over and over and over. Is that I saw that when I was cutting it, Greer, after he neatly lays out all of his clothes, he goes to get in bed with Nola, right? And the way he kind of in the bed, I could see that there was probably only 2 takes because of how Spike had to shoot that movie. Probably only 2 takes of him getting into bed, but I could see that I could do this thing where it's a double cut of him getting into bed twice. But you can see that it's not exactly the same action, not exactly, right? And so I did that just to make Spike laugh, right? And because I could always make Spike laugh. And I didn't mean it for anything than that. But Spike loved it. He goes, we're keeping that. We're keeping that. But you'll see this in films over the years, right? These double cuts. But what happened with that scene of that lovemaking scene is that they kept kicking it back and saying, no, it's X-rated, no. And so finally we said, tell us exactly what, you tell us what's wrong and we make these changes and then you just say it's X-rated. And so he said, what exactly is the problem, right? Exactly. We'll give you a 0 mark and you give us exactly the footage and the shots that are the problem. So, they did that. And we came back with another cut. And then I became a father around that time. My son was born 2 weeks before She's Gonna Have It opened. And so I, with my first wife, we went off with the baby off to this house in Pennsylvania, this little house in Pennsylvania that we had. And, I came back the day of the opening of She's Gotta Have It. And I called Spike up and Spike said, oh man, great. You're here. We got a problem. He said, that scene, they're still giving us an X rating. And now they're mad at us because we've released the film with an R rating on it. So you got to go. So we've negotiated a deal. We got to lose the second half of that scene. And you got to go up to the theater right now and cut the second half of that scene out. Right? So I did. I went up there and cut the second half of the scene out. And the music underneath the scene is Olatunji. Is that this drum thing? And it's just simply, I thought, well, the sound's going to be terrible because the way the film is, the sound goes through a sound head 18 frames later, away from where the picture goes through the lens, right?
Sure.
So, but man, because it was seamless. And so that was my first editing for Spike. And Spike, unbeknownst to me, he was doing a book, a diary of She's Gonna Have It. And the book came out because the film was this huge success right away. And it changed Hollywood. It changed Hollywood, which was amazing that it did. It changed it, because people understood at that moment, wow, there's this huge audience out there and there's a vacuum, And, but in Spike's book, I was reading it because I'm like amazed. Spike, how did you were taking notes all the way through this? I didn't see you do it. And yet he's amazing. He's remarkable in that respect. And always a very sense of feeling like he's living in history. And he was. beyond making history, he was living it and recording it. And in the book, he said really nice things about me as a filmmaker, and then said, Barry's going to cut my next film, right? And I thought, wow, what? He never said it to me. He never said that to me at all. He's going to cut my next film. So I cut School Days, and my friend Mira Nair, who I'd cut, like, I actually cut something else for Mira right around that time, a documentary. But Mira was like, wow, you just did School Day, you did Spike's film? Oh, I'm doing this film in India. I want you to cut it. So Salam Bombay. So I cut Salam Bombay. And then right after Salam Bombay, Spike did Do the Right Thing. And I got to tell you, all the way through all those films, I did not feel like an editor. I just did not feel like an editor. I felt like I was editing films for my friends because they didn't know anybody else. That's how I felt, And I was thinking, God, this is great. This is good. But I'm not an editor. I'm expecting any day for somebody to walk in the room, especially like on Do the Right Thing, where we're doing it for Universal. For somebody from Universal walking in and saying, wait a second, what's he doing here? What, Spike, you can't, this is a real movie with a real budget. You can't just hire your buddy to come in and edit the movie, right? You got to get a real editor. And I expected that. all the way through that movie, that somebody's going to just grab me by the ear and pull me out of the room. I absolutely expected it. And I was wondering why they didn't do it. And the one thing about, we were so young and so green, I didn't know I was supposed to be editing while they were shooting. So I didn't edit. Spike didn't say, why you, Spike didn't know it either, really. And so I waited. I mean, it was in the days where you could do dailies. So we watched dailies every day together, which was great. You just don't do that anymore, but it's a priceless way of working. Right. And it really helps. And so I waited till the film got shot, and then I started editing. And we're working in 35, but I cut that film. The first cut was in the next 6 weeks. And that's fast today. Yeah. And that was really fast then. I was always fast. And there was something listen, it's a beautiful script. Yep. And it's kind of cinematically, it's almost a perfect script. And that it's one domino that hits another, that hits another, that hits another, that hits another. So the thing that happens at the very beginning of the film then leads you all the way around to this final conclusion. Right. And that's just gorgeous. That is just gorgeous storytelling. Right. And hats off to Spike for that. And so for Do the Right Thing, it was probably the very first film. No, that's not true. Salam Bombay, I very, 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 very much lost myself in the process of editing. And for those two first films that I could really lose myself in the editing process, I just lost myself. And you're just in the movie. And you couldn't talk to me while I was editing in those days. You couldn't. I would lose everything. And so I had assistants that would just stop people from even walking into the room. And so, yeah, we got that rough cut done in 6 weeks. And then I'm sure that we had, then the director's cut over the next few months.
And Barry, was there, not to interrupt you, was there an expectation at that point, given what you guys had done together, and given that Spike was now this growing director, was there an expectation that was different? A studio movie now, there's clearly, like you've said, an audience for these films that Spike and you guys had identified together with She's Gotta Have It and School Days. And was there now this added pressure, added difference? No. Did it change anything?
There was more pressure on School Days than on Do the Right Thing. The only thing for both of us, I think we've always kind of worked this way. To some extent, we work a little bit in a bubble, especially I work in a bubble because Spike protects me from everybody. They can't talk to me. Even now in BlaKKKlansman, nobody could talk to me. So I work in a bubble, and Spike is that wall. You got to get over that wall, and nobody can get over it, right? So I'm always really protected. And but mainly what it is we just work the way we work in terms of like, what do we like? What do we like? What do we think is working? What do we think is not working? That's really how it always has been. It was then and still now. Not a very different way of working. It's not. I know that when we were finishing the film, there was this response by white people that it was a dangerous movie. It was an incredibly dangerous movie. And the thing about it is I think that Spike wasn't so surprised by that response. For me, it was shocking. Just a shocking response. Because I just looked at it and I was so proud of the movie when we were finishing it up. I was just like, wow, look at this. Look at this. To me, it was just a gem.
Yep.
A little gem of a movie, right? And then we'd do these screenings in which people would just be furious. Not black people, white people. Only white people. They would be furious. You're irresponsible. You're going to get people hurt. You're going to get people killed. You're going to start riots. And the first time somebody said that to me personally, I was like, oh, what? with this movie? What? Because, and then, because I had a very different point of view about all this. I think you talk about the problem, right? Talking about the problem doesn't cause riots. It's actually putting a lid on things and letting the pressure build. And then the pressure, boom, it explodes. You talk about it, that's when people feel heard. I'm heard. Finally, somebody's hearing me. Somebody's putting this up on the screen. So, and finally, it was shown that Spike was right. It didn't cause problems.
Yeah. And obviously a very special film.
Yeah, very special film. A very, very special film. And one that, I'm very proud of. It's obviously very close to my heart. But I think with Salon Bombay and Do the Right Thing, back to back, both of them are really special films.
So Barry, just because I know we're coming up on time, and I know I want to get back to Son of the South a little bit. Taking some of these foundational years, and then thinking through the sort of putting the hat back on as a director, I almost think that's the wrong question, because it's almost like you never took off just the general hat of being a filmmaker and being an artist. No, and that's how you saw yourself.
Always. I always saw myself in that, exactly what you said. But also, like when at some point Spike understood that I could direct the actors in the ADR sessions, right? And I mean, sometimes it was really necessary. Spike would have to direct the actors. But when he realized, oh man, Barry can direct these guys too. Oh yeah, okay, good. Because there's a lot of things that are like you go do that, right? You go do
Right.
Like we had to have a voice for the dog in Summer of Sam, right? And John Turturro did the voice, and Spike wanted to do it during the shooting. Spike said, "You go direct John," right? And we had like an hour. You know, after 5 minutes of getting Turturro to do kill. So, finally, Turturro said, "Barry, what else can I do? Are we really going to go over an hour?" You know, so I have had all these years also of directing actors in the studio, and there was also times where I was, you know, Spike's second unit director, like on Malcolm X, you know, and so, you know, so yeah, I never really felt like, oh, I'm just an editor, you know,
Right.
I'm just an editor.
And that was empowering, I'm sure. I just think hearing your story and I'm going to bring it all back to the idea that you and Spike connected early on about loving Broadway musicals and about just having this, I would sort of call it this ability to just always pull the thread of being curious and pull the thread of being interested in art and entertainment and ideas and bringing them forward.
Yeah.
That sort of student of life that never really, the flame of that never really goes out, obviously was a huge powering factor for you. And it seems like that's been a huge powering factor for your relationship with Spike, but also the work you've done without Spike.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, like Spike also has this ability after all these years that, you know, the next project he is just excited about. He gets, there's this, the same thing, the way he felt when we were young and in the 80s, you know, and the enthusiasm for a project, you know, it's there again and again and again and again, you know.
It's amazing.
You know, he just called me about doing something where I'm going to go back to New York in about a month to work with Spike, like for the summer, probably for the rest of the year, on this other thing, this documentary, and you know, and when he called me and was telling me about it, I mean, there was still that youthful excitement, and I mean, hopefully, I have that too.
You do.
That sense of it's still it's a wonder, you know, and there's nothing. I don't think terribly jaded about either one of us, and we love the process. We're both really lucky. We love movies,
right?
And we love entertainment, but we also both love the process, and that's a gift.
It is.
That is a gift because there's so many people that come into the business and they discover, I don't really like this process because it's not in of itself, it's not glamorous,
right?
You know, it can be grueling. But if you begin to think it's tedious, you're in trouble.
Right.
It can't be tedious to you. It can't be. You gotta just be. You gotta be able to lose yourself in it. And I can still lose myself in it, and Spike can definitely lose himself in it. And you know, it's and like with Son of the South, you know, when I first told Spike the story of Son of the South about a white guy from Alabama who gets caught up in the civil rights movement, Spike said, "Oh, come on! Oh, the great white savior, huh?" I said, "This is not the great white savior. If anything, he's the one saved by the civil rights movement, and this is true. Bob is saved by the civil rights movement, and that's the big difference." And I said, "Just read the script. Just read the script." And so he read the script, and he said, "Oh, okay, yeah, I see it. You know."
Yep.
And so, I mean, he came on as executive producer for the film.
Right.
You know, and, you know, gave me notes on the script, then gave me notes on the cut. You know, gave me notes about casting. You know, oddly enough, I mean, you know, he gave me this really great advice about casting. You know, if you're looking at whether somebody is maybe more attractive or a better actor, he says, man, you got to go with the better actor. you gotta go with the better actor. You gotta, you know. And of course, that might seem obvious, you know, but
not always. Yeah,
not always.
Not for everyone.
No, not even when you're in the midst of it. It's always obvious. It's not always obvious, you know. And I ended up with a great cast, and we didn't have anybody, you know. All of the entire cast that we had for the film dropped out 6 weeks before the film went into production. They all dropped out for various reasons. Like Brian Cox called me up personally, and he said, listen, I know I told you I would do it, but I just picked up the script to read it again. Now that you're really going into production, I can't play one of these guys again. I just can't. He said, you got to forgive me. You got to forgive me. And you got to understand, I just can't do it. But he called me like a Mitch,
right?
You know, to say, I can't do it. And I respect the hell out of him for that. And Brian Dennehy then came in to play the role. And Brian, I mean, I was heartbroken when Brian Cox said no, but Brian Dennehy just knocked it out of the park.
Yep.
Knocked it out of the park, you know?
Sure.
So I mean, I ended up with this incredible cast, you know, with having nobody going in 6 weeks before. I mean, I have Julia Ramon, and Julia did an amazing job. And she took on this voice, this accent that was a very dangerous accent to do. This northern Alabama accent from the period. Because Virginia Durr was from the northern part of Alabama, where my grandmother's from. And they both had this gorgeous accent. And Julia took it on with a voice coach, and she got that accent. She got that, and she got that character to the extent, I mean, Julia's not from the South. And I don't think she ever lived in the South, but she immersed herself so much. She had this one improvisational line, which she said to somebody as they were walking away from the scene. It's about somebody who actually borrowed her car, and the car got burnt because they parked it right in front of where the demonstration was, basically. And silly thing to do, really. But and all happened. And as they're walking away in this one take, Julia says to the other actress, I'm glad you came back in one piece, because Clifford's going to want to kill you. And I'm like, oh, you know, because she was so into it. She could, you know, bring that up from somewhere. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I grew up with, you know.
Right. That's exciting. That's exciting.
So yeah, and Luke is still incredible as Bob. I mean, and quite frankly, you see the real Bob Zellner at the end of the film, and man, oh man, you see how Lucas nailed him. He nailed him.
Yeah.
You know, and Cedric the Entertainer came in to play Reverend Ralph Abernathy. And I mean, I couldn't get anybody to come in and play him. And then finally the script got to Cedric the Entertainer, and he said yes right away. And I was like, oh, and Cedric is just amazing. He's amazing.
It's excellent.
Oh, yeah. And so, you know, when, you know, you sometimes when you're looking at something, you know, and you're thinking, oh my God, how are we going to do this? You know, 6 weeks before going into production, you got nobody. I mean, nobody. And then
it comes together.
Yeah. And then we have, and Shamira Anderson, who came in to play a role. And Shamir is brilliant. And Shamir is a brilliant actor. And I don't think he's ever gotten a chance to be able to play this kind of role and to show what he can really do, what power to play. He's got power, But I tell you, he blew the audition. He did. He sent me a tape that was like terrible. I mean, but I saw that he was good, But he went way over the top. He was all, And I said, and we got on the phone together. I said, listen, you're a soldier. You've been in this fight, right? So when something really bad happens, you're not just going to lose it. That's all here. Because you've seen people die before. You've seen people die. You've known people who've been killed. Now you're talking to, when you talk about it, you're talking to other people who have been in the fight as well. You got it. And finally, when he understood that, he said, yeah, because, he grew up in the projects. I didn't have to tell him what, I said, you just got to pull from your own life. Sure. And that's what he did. And he is brilliant.
Well, Barry, I don't mean to cut you off at all. I know I'm taking up more of your time than we had arranged for.
It's been great. It's been great.
No, it's exciting. I mean, I can feel the energy. I can feel the passion. And like you said, I mean, I think you've been in the business a long time, and there are not that many people who've been in the business a long time who still have that same spark that they had.
Oh, what a shame. Huh? What a shame.
It is a shame. I totally agree with you. But I want to thank you for spending the time. As we sign off, I know Son of the South is still in post and the pieces are still assembling for its release. Any details to leave everyone with to think about where to catch the film, or any updates as the film nears its upcoming?
That is a moving target at the moment, especially with the COVID-19 situation. Yep. I mean, is there a film festival it can even go to? Right. Is there a festival that's going to happen this year? Or are cinemas going to open? We don't know. So everything's up in the air. I mean, we've had a handful of screenings, and they've all gone incredibly well.
Great.
We even had a screening with a French subtitle version in Paris they got the film just as much as the Americans got the film, and were just as moved and just as inspired, because it's an inspiring story. Right. Bob Zellner is, it's a real story, and it's the story about somebody who comes to making the tough right choice little by little by little. Yeah. And that's really the way things happen. It's just not one moment somebody wakes up and says, man, I'm going to do that. Right. That's not the way it is. Not the way it is for anybody. That wasn't even the way it was for Martin Luther King Jr. Or Rosa Parks. It wasn't.
Right. It was gradual.
Step by step by step. Yeah. Now, some of those steps are very fast, but still step by step.
Barry, I can't thank you enough. Really looking forward to obviously seeing the final film. We loved having the Buffalo 8 team be a part of it.
Oh, they were great. Buffalo 8 was great. I was so happy to be there. It was wonderful.
Good. Well, enjoy the sunshine you have over there in Provence.
Yes, I will.
And we will catch up soon, and looking forward to just keeping in touch and seeing Son of the South come out soon.
Soon. Okay.
Thanks so much, Barry. Be well. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Greenlit, the Buffalo 8 podcast. For financing questions, feel free to contact us at Bondit Media Capital at info@bondit.us. For production, development, and distribution questions, feel free to contact us at Buffalo 8, info@buffalo8.com. We'd love to hear from you and hope you'll continue listening to the podcast episodes ahead.